see nods, but I don't see any hands. You don't have to raise your hand. Okay, so we've kind of got like a half and half kind of thing. Well, that's good, because so the presentation that I'm going to be doing is You Look Like a Freak, which discusses societal recognition and the influences that gender has on, essentially, society recognizing us as human beings, whether you're trans or not. And this discussion is very fluid and very flexible, so we can essentially tailor it to whatever we want it to be. So if we are going kind of too basic 101 and you all are getting bored, we can push it forward and make it more discussion-based and be more on the theoretical side. All right, so please give me feedback. You're like, all right, I know all this stuff. I'm bored. So essentially, let's go down. If you have any questions or expansions on the words that we're talking about, we'll go with them. So sexual identity, that's a categorization that we have in our society based on biological sex, chromosomal makeup, genetics. It's that label that gets put on you when you pop out of your mom. And it's like, hey, this is a blank. This is a boy, this is a girl, based on categories of male and female sex. And then also, we have the very often unspoken identity of intersex, which is everyone familiar with intersex identity? I'm going to go over it anyway, so you don't have to know it. Intersex identity is essentially when you have a person who has any kind of physical combination or the less friendly or like PCOS, like ambiguous genetic or genitalia makeup. So a common word that's used is hermaphrodite, which is actually not accurate, because what a hermaphrodite is in biology, you have a fish or frog that can actually physically change from one sex to another, and even sometimes fertilize its own self. Whereas in human beings, that's physically impossible. So hermaphrodism in human beings is actually, could never happen. So what the correct term is intersex, and also you would hear DSD, which is disorders of sexual development. And we're not going to focus a lot on intersex identity, but just to point out that it's not just a binary in physical sex, male or female. We also have a lot of in-betweens. We're going to talk more about that in-between as well in the presentation. And if you want more information about intersex identities, I recommend just Googling it. And the first thing that'll come up is it's your International Association for Intersex Persons, and it's a really great resource. And then so next we have gender and gender identity. So these are words that are getting thrown around a lot, especially nowadays with a lot of the political about trans identities and gender as a construct, right? So gender is a social construction of masculinity and femininity inside any social culture. So what's masculine and feminine in, say, culture in St. Louis may not be the same concept of masculine and femininity across the globe. So it's very culturally specific. And then gender identity is different. Gender identity is something that is personal, that is built into each individual person. So your gender identity is your psychological sense of self, either as male, as female, or as both, or neither, or all of the above. It's really something that is in you. Each of us, we wake up every day, but we don't think, okay, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, or I'm a girl, I'm a girl, I'm a girl. These are things that are just in us that we know. And sometimes these things can be convoluted and mixed in with other concepts of our social identity. And that's something that we're going to expand upon also. And so next we have something that I'm sure we're all familiar with, which is sexual orientation, which is who we're physically and or emotionally / romantically attracted to and who we may partner with. And then sexual orientation identity, which is essentially what we call ourselves. So any kind of label that we place on ourselves, not based on behavior, but based on that emotional, cultural, community attachment to that word. So you could have someone who likes to have sex with both men and women, and partners with men, women, and say trans folk, but identifies as lesbian. So somebody's definition, if you walked in and like, what is a lesbian? Like, oh, well, a woman who has sex with women. But as you can see, that label can be owned by someone regardless of what their behavior is. It's about where their community history is and what their experience is to what label speaks to them. And you also get a lot of words like, for instance, queer. We were just talking about this with your professor, about how queer is this overarching label that can mean someone who sleeps with people of the same sex, but it can also mean someone who sleeps with people of multiple genders, multiple sexes, someone who is heterosexual but has a very non-conformative political view, or maybe is an ally to the queer community. I personally like to go with the mentality that Kate Bornstein goes with, And she says, we don't need allies, we need members, right? So I think that allies, the A in the LGBTQPIAO, that huge alphabetical acronym, A's are part of the queer community too. We're all, if you're here, you're queer. So queer is one of those labels that can be applied to lots of different people in a lot of different ways and have lots of different meanings, but it's still the same word. And that's one of the things about our community when we're having conversations like this one. What kind of language do we use to describe ourselves, and what does it mean to each of us? How do we create a standard or foundation of communication if all of our words mean different things? That's going to be something that we'll be discussing. And then these terms are not necessarily going to come up as much, but I tend to use them a bit, so just so you have an idea of where I'm coming from, these are more theoretical words that have been drilled into my brain from various means of hierarchical institutional garb. So we have gender role, which is the behaviors, the attitudes, essentially anything that is placed upon a person based on what sex they are. It's what's considered appropriate for